Hi guys, it's Blackie, and today I have a very special guest. You have heard me many times and for many years on my videos talking about my last living mentor, Sir Francis McGowan, and this is Sir Francis.
Well, thank you, Blackie.
He has been such an influence on me, and as I have said many times publicly, I am merely a shadow of Francis McGowan. I learned so much from this man over the years of how to conduct yourself and how to be a woodsman, of how to deal with others in the woodland environment, etc. And he and I met the first time in 1984 at the Southeastern Rendezvous. Demopolis. There I was, a green as a May apple. I had a lot of woods experience, but I didn't know that much about living history yet. And he was the old saint of the swamps coming up, and he kind of took me under his wing. And we have canoed and camped together for next year's what, 40 years?
I guess so. I hadn't even thought about that. That was
40 years next year.
right. My, how time flies when it's raining.
Yes. And early on I had mentioned, and I showed some pictures of when, and his name is Sir Francis McGowan. He's been knighted, but I call him Grouch. He earned that name of Grouch. And but I talked about back in 2013, me and him went and canoed the Delta north of Mobile, and I posted a picture of him where we ran. It's real tight, steep banks, guys.
All them damn alligators.
Oh God, gators everywhere. And we'd come around the corner and there was a big oak tree in the water. Well, without hesitation, he just went right up into the tree and high centered up on a limb and stepped out onto the limb, pulled out his kukri and went to trimming out, making a hole for us to go through. And then as the water cleared, because we'd stirred it up coming in there, the water cleared up and I looked down, we had 3, 8 or 9, 10-foot long alligators, and one of them, he's standing on the limb where his feet's in the water. About a 6-inch wide limb, and he's standing there chopping, and that alligator's nose up about 4 feet below him looking up at him. And I went, Francis, and he turned around and looked at me, I was saying, you got a friend. You remember what you said to me?
No, I don't.
You looked down and said, she just wants to suck on my toes.
Oh, that's right.
And went back to cutting.
I remember that. Yeah.
Old Marine.
Well, you got to remember, in the 1950 to 1955, I lived in the Choctawhatchee Swamp, which is 25 miles wide and 75 miles long, and I lived on an island down there. And I had my own, not kukri then, but a machete and a map and a compass. And here I was 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old, had my own boat, and my father trusted me and my brother to go anywhere in that swamp. And all those years we didn't get turned around, we knew where we were, but it clouded over and I didn't have a compass with us. And my brother Jack and I sat there for 3 days till the sun came back out, and then we came right back out. But during that 3 days after we ate what little food we had, we went and broke an egg to make an omelet, and it had a biddy in it. And I looked at Jack, and he looked at me, and he said, I'm hungry. We stirred that thing up and ate it feet, toenails, and body.
Oh yeah, when you're hungry, it real quick. Doesn't matter that much.
But that was my beginning, and of course then I went in the Marines when I was 16 and stayed in there almost a long time and served all over the world, and I got to go to play in the Arctic, and I got to play in jungles, the deltas, the desert, and everywhere I went I studied and learned, and it's like whenever I went out in the towns of wherever I was at, I didn't want a hamburger, I didn't want a hot dog, well I might have wanted them. I always ate the local food, and that way I knew if I liked it or if I didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
I just wasn't saying, oh, that doesn't sound good. Because, man, there's a lot of things that don't sound good.
It really don't when you start in my traveling, you know, and you're the one that pointed it out. But I knew it was right in my limited experience when I was traveling like I was of how water tastes different, smells different wherever you go. And you told me in some places you go, so you wouldn't get ice in a drink or nothing because the water tasted so bad. It just, you couldn't even get a Coke, it'd taste bad. So I learned that, and that made a point to me about wherever we went, smell the water before you start drinking. If it smells like sulfur or whatever, don't drink it. And learn to navigate.
Well, right here, just 30 miles from here is a little town called Georgiana.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a boy, the wells were sulfur wells. And everybody took water and put it in a half-gallon container and let it sit a day or two, and the bottom would be black, and that was sulfur. And it stank. And when I complained about it to my grandfather, he said, well, just go without a week, and he said, you'll get used to it. And you know, I got used to it.
Yes, you will get used to it. When you ain't getting any, it becomes real important in a hurry.
Yeah, yeah.
But when we would go and canoe and camp, and you know, I considered myself, well, let's see, 1984, I was 20 years old when we met. And I was fairly experienced in camping, hunting, fishing, being in the outdoors. And we would have a pack basket or a rucksack or whatever we were doing, and we'd go to set up. And God, how I hated you at times. Because we'd get there and we'd say, okay, we'll set up here. I'd drop my sack and I'd trim off limbs and I'd get my ridge line and I'd turn around and you'd be fully sat up with your feet propped up, sitting there smoking your pipe. Like it'd been 30 freaking seconds, you know. And I would struggle to get it done. And you do it so fast. But then once I learned to sit down and watch you, rather than going ahead and making my camp, he rolled his tarp up a certain way. So that when he put it in his pack, when he pulled it out, there's the first grommet, there's the second grommet. He hooked and just walked, and his tarp unfolded. He pulled out the bottom and put 2 stakes. He's done. The old canvas hammock you had. You knew exactly how far the trees had to be. You knew the exact knot to use. You tick, tick, he was up. It was all smooth like glass.
Well, experience, and the key word is practice.
Practice.
Practice is a wonderful teacher. Anytime a man chops wood, it looks smooth. He's got good splits. He's making kindling, little 2x2s or 4x4s. He's done it a lot. Anytime Mama walks in the kitchen and 20 minutes later has egg salad and cheese toast and stuff like this, she's done it a lot. What I used to do, and this is after I retired from the Marines, I would go out on Saturday sometimes right behind my house. I had a vacant lot there. And I would set up my gear, and no matter what, I would not go back in the house for all my cooking and everything. And if I determined I needed another item, I wrote it down. If I determined I had too much of an item, I got rid of it. And I practiced just as hard at home. Now, I learned that when I first started shooting the rifle professionally as a marksmanship or team shooter for the Marine Corps. I had a gunnery sergeant named Ward and a staff sergeant named Eric England. Eric England was the finest high-powered rifle shooter in America at that time. They taught me about practice. Every shot that you make practicing, you work just as hard to make it perfect as if you had a live round in the chamber. Because if you rush a shot just because you're giving out of breath or in this practice, you'll do it for real one day.
Mm-hmm.
And there was many a time after that that I'd put a 9.5-pound rifle on my shoulder, roll it in, hold it up with one hand
Mm-hmm.
for 1 minute and practice. And I would not squeeze that trigger if that sight picture was perfect. And because of the audience we're speaking to, I'm sure they know terminology like sight picture or brass,
Exactly.
breathe, relax, aim, slack, squeeze, stuff like that. But if it wasn't perfect, when I shot the Marine Corps matches in the 1960s, I placed 51st with a perfect score.
Mm-hmm.
They were picking 100 best shooters.
Mm-hmm.
A perfect score, and I placed 51st.
Yeah. A perfect score, and you're
Right.
in the middle
and
of the
I have
pack.
that medal, and it's right over there hanging up with a lot of the other damn medals and trophies. And that's the one I'm the most proud of. It's just because you're perfect doesn't mean you're the best.
Yep. Our experience together doing so much, for 20 years we did Living History together.
Yeah.
And for those of you that may not know, we were part of a group that was the Alabama Red Wolves, with Francis being the head of the Red Wolves. And we were working with the National Muzzleloading Rifle Association, putting on the Southeastern Rendezvous. Usually, well, from 1990 to 2000, we either were putting it on or working on it as dog soldiers at every event.
Right.
I don't think there was one in there that we didn't work in some way. And so we camped for up to a week at a time and doing these type of events. And simple is often good, but at the same time there was a lot of work and there was a lot of stress, but there was a lot of good fellowship and picking. And that, I remember one particular rendezvous that Francis got this thing going with black-eyed peas and rice. And so breakfast was scrambled eggs and black-eyed peas and rice.
Don't criticize the cook unless you want to cook.
If you criticize the cook, you got to cook. Well, it was black-eyed peas and rice and eggs. Lunchtime was a ham sandwich and black-eyed peas and rice. Dinner was, I think if I remember, like a pork chop and black-eyed peas and rice. And every day when I walked
like
up,
Hoppin' John.
whoo, every day when I walked up, he would have slopped my plate. Go, here you go, Blackie, I made your plate. I never once complained.
No, you didn't. And after 3 days when we ran out, I cooked something else.
But for 3 days, every meal was black-eyed peas and rice and something.
That's right. But it was fiddling.
It was, but you were trying your best to get me to complain about your cooking. Oh boy.
You know, I grew up in the 1940s. It was a different time.
Mm-hmm.
There were quail. Race relations in a lot of places in the United States have gone to hell in a handbucket today.
Mm-hmm.
We had some bad things down here in South Alabama, but we had a lot of good things too.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember our camp cooks. They were all black men,
Mm-hmm.
one women. They were black men. And these guys, no matter what kind of trouble they got into, were kept on the payroll year-round, because in September, hunting camp was open, and it didn't close to February.
Mm-hmm.
And these guys stayed out there and cooked for whoever came out in hunting camp. I grew up with what is now called Cajun cooking.
Mm-hmm.
We had it, all these wonderful meals. I grew up with baked fish. I grew up with quail prepared a dozen different ways, bacon wrapped around it, what have you. I grew up with oysters and shrimp.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I thought everybody ate oysters. I didn't care if it looked like something that had dropped out of an ox's nose.
Yeah,
You know,
it was edible.
yeah, and you had your oyster stew and fried oysters and raw oysters, baked oysters and steamed oysters. So I grew up with men who could cook, and if you ask them a question, they would answer, and if you asked to be shown, they would take the time. That's where I learned to make hoe cake, which is now called skillet bread.
Yeah.
You know, and I learned from my father-in-law when cooking cornbread, if you got children that are finicky, add just a little sugar to it, and they think they're eating cake.
Sweet bread, yeah.
That's right. If you got corn that you have kept either frozen in water or in the ice box, you can take the kernels and cook in bread, and that way it just so many different things. And if you remember, we would pull it in on a sandbar, and I'd start a fire, and we would cook breakfast. Now, sometimes I had that little box in my canoe with sand in it. When I got in there, I would start my little fire, put my coffee pot on, put 2 eggs in it. When the coffee perked, I had 2 soft-boiled eggs.
Yep, boiling eggs in a coffee pot while making coffee.
First fish I caught, I split open and washed him out, did not bother to scale him, tacked him on a board, rubbed salt, pepper, and lemon juice in him, leaned up there against the side of my canoe and let the fire bake it. And I'd have hot coffee, soft-boiled eggs, and fresh fish while floating down the creek, playing with a fly rod. It don't get no better.
I remember the first time you took me down Pigeon Creek, and you did that. It was kind of early in the year, probably early March, and it was cool. And
I think it was cold, probably.
It was pretty damn cold. Well, he had this box full of sand, you know, about yay big, sitting in the bed of the thing, and he built a fire in the box.
In the canoe.
In the canoe, as he's paddling the canoe, he had that fire going, like you said, so he had him a couple of bricks or whatever, and he had his coffee pot up there, so he's making coffee in an active canoe while canoeing and fishing. You know, and remember the lady that at one point we came around the bend and she thought your canoe was on fire because the smoke was coming out, you know, and she couldn't see into the canoe because the angle she was at, and she said, "Is your canoe on fire?" He said, "No, ma'am, athlete's foot real bad, it's real hot." Oh boy.
We would float Pigeon or some other stream in a canoe, and you can take a fly rod and you got a 30 or 40 foot creek. You can work both sides with a risk. And you're fishing where the cypress comes down to the water.
No knots.
That's right. And those little grooves in between the root system. You're fishing your lily pads. And I just always thought that the greatest thing in the world was to hear that pop when a fish came up from the bottom that was.
And grab one.
Oh yeah.
You always liked poppers, and I always liked them little soft jigs.
Right.
That looked like a grub, and would flip it out there and let it sink. But I struggled. I really did. He would let me shove off first.
In the Delta, I remember fishing this little creek, and I was using a fly rod, and I actually think you got aggravated at me.
I got a little aggravated,
when you threw your fly rod down.
Yeah, you got.
I had these fish. And told them we're not gonna go hungry tonight.
Oh boy, you got the current trying to do one thing with you. Wind trying to blow you another way.
That's right, it was a major river.
You're sitting here trying to work a fly rod.
Yeah.
My canoe's going every damn where.
Mine was pretty straight.
His as straight as an arrow, and I couldn't figure out what he was doing. It was only later I figured out he had that milk jug full of sand.
I need a little weight in the back hanging over.
He took a milk jug, filled it full of sand, tied a cord to it, and he just slid it down real quiet, and it would slowly drag on the bottom. Well, it'd keep you straight right in the middle of the current.
That's right.
I'm fighting left or right, and every time I go to cast, I'm sideways, and he's just sitting there puffing his pipe like nothing's going on, pulling in fish, and I'm fighting for my life to stay upright in this thing.
Isn't the experience a wonderful
Oh
teacher?
yeah, I wanted to brain you so bad. Just point your bow the other way.
You know,
now the other way.
Unfortunately, maybe that's how I got the name Grouch. I did a lot of this stuff. Of course, you got to remember, I spent the majority of my life outside.
Yeah.
You know, even when I was in the Marine Corps and married, we went to the field on Monday, and we came in Friday at noontime. I was outdoors. I remember it was raining. It would have drowned a frog. I went over, cut it down, built a fire, put my coffee on, got my skillet out, and one of the guys said, "If that damn grouch thinks I'm going to ask to cook over his fire."
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
I know that did aggravate some people, that I could walk over there and make it look easy. But they hadn't been where I'd been. They had more money than I did. All of them were better looking. I feel like I had the best looking wife, but they were better looking. And most of them were taller than me. So I never understood why they wanted to growl.
They always got to. Well, now, I want to give you credit that in all those years, you never got frustrated with me when I was trying to learn. There were times that you would try to put forth an idea and I just could not get it in my head sideways. It just would not work. I couldn't see what you were trying to say. But he would be just as calm, and I would make the effort and it would go flat. He wouldn't get upset. He wouldn't do something. And he'd just reiterate, all right, you do it this way, do that, now do this. You know, it's as easy as taking your shoes off.
Well,
he wouldn't get frustrated with me, and that was a huge thing because I would get frustrated fairly easy. And my teaching skill that you guys always compliment me on how well I take the time to explain and I go into detail, this is the reason right here. It was him that I'm copying because of the skill that I saw him show to me and to others in scouting and etc. and young woodsmen and people have come in amongst us to learn how to camp. He would never get upset. He would deal with the individual and find their strengths and their weaknesses and work with it. Simple and easy.
When the student fails to learn, the instructor has failed to teach. So therefore, it is the instructor's fault. How can he get mad when it's his fault? What he has to do is like training a bird dog or any dog. The animal wants to please you. The student in the outdoors wants to please you. I don't know about school, but in the outdoors.
In the outdoors, yes.
Yes. So, you have to be intelligent enough to get your idea across to the dog or to your student who's not the dog. And if the first method fails, look for another method. Whether you use less verbal and more practical application or what have you. But change your method slightly because repetition is boring after a while.
And it's also the fact of, and I got this from you, and a lot of guys have said that I'm the one that came up with that. That's not true. Francis did. And that was fail. First attempt in learning. You're gonna fail. That's how you learn. Failure teaches you everything. Success don't teach you jack. It means you already know how to do it. So you're gonna fail. Expect to fail. Figure out why I failed. Fail better next time. And after a while you get to where you just can't fail at it because you understand. I've told them the story about when I wanted to learn how to do a bow drill set. And I came down to the land and we went out there and you said, okay, because I was going to be staying a week with you, that we would do a bow drill set. And so every day at lunch I had to build a fire by making the bow drill set. You helped me pick out the woods the first day. Then I struggled like a madman to get that thing to work. And he sat there very calmly smoking his pipe. It probably took me an hour that first time to get it cold.
I remember because I was whittling one too.
Yep.
And believe it or not, I just threw the damn thing away.
He
I
did.
had that set, the drill, and the leather thong wrapped around it.
Yep. He carved one out, and then he showed it to me and said, it looks like this. Look at the detail. And I had to do a second. I'd burned through the first time and had not got a coal. I ended up, I think it was on my fourth attempt. I finally got a coal. And then we got the fire going. And when I got the fire going, he said, "Now take that set and throw it in the fire." And we burned. I saved the cord. And every day I had to do a new set. And on Sunday, when I lit the lunch one, and that took me maybe 15 minutes to do it that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I got that fire going. And you said, "Well, what have you learned?" And I said, "I'll carry a damn Bic lighter in my pocket till I die." And you laughed and said, "Yes."
You know, that's one of the most important things I tried to teach. Hawk Broughton,
Yes, the great hawk.
very famous buck skinner, used to have a class, 27 ways to make fire without matches.
Yes.
Okay. And of course, me having lived in, like I said, the Arctic, jungle, tundra, I knew how valuable fire was. And almost every single place I went, I carried a regular lighter, I carried a Bic lighter, I carried matches, and I carried what was necessary for flint and steel. Because I could, if the material was there to make it, I could always make a fire drill, you know.
Mhm.
But just one thing do not be without. That's like a knife. Jokingly, I call them a knife.
Mm-hmm.
I've got in this room right here over 100 different knives, easy,
Mm-hmm.
racks of them. I would carry a short knife. Well, yeah, I think there's a bucket back there. Well, that was just racked there.
Mm-hmm. All kinds of knives.
Right, but if I could only carry two, I would carry short blade fixed blade knife,
Mm-hmm.
about 3 inches max,
Mm-hmm.
and that would be for my small utility work around camp.
Mm-hmm.
And I would carry a well-made kukri.
Mm-hmm.
It's heavy enough to hammer with. You can actually cook off of it. You wouldn't want to, but you could, because you might change the makeup of the steel.
You can dig with it,
You
split
can dig
with it,
you
throw
can-
with it.
Right, you can. I've just never found a better piece of steel. Plus, when you're holding it, of course, the blade's built like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a dental tooth. Your handle is like this, and your blade comes out like this, and the blade is actually an extension of your arm.
Mm-hmm.
You're not breaking your wrist
Mm-hmm.
like you would with a hatchet or
Mhm.
anything else to chop. So your wrist gets less tired, especially if you're going to do a lot of chopping.
Especially when you're having to
Right,
trim your way
and-
through with it.
And actually I carry a kukri that the British Army made, and mine's marked with the broad arrow that I carried it twice in Vietnam. Well, I carried it all over the world enough that I finally gave up on scabbards and just started making my own, because I wore out so many. And
Well, that time when Miss Ann down at the cabin wanted us to clean that out to see the creek.
oh yeah,
And we both had those two-handed machetes.
yeah,
And so we got side by side where we couldn't touch each other. And we're talking about a little over 100 yards through that thicket. And so we went through first with the kukris and cut paths,
right, line
lines,
of cut.
where we had room to swing something. So we took kukris, and it would take us 30, 45 minutes to go through that. And we'd get to that end and we'd flop down and chug a lug water. And the ladies and all would drag limbs out. And then we came back through with the regular length machetes, trimmed out anything that could reach. And then we went back through with the big,
Two-handed.
two-handers that it touches the ground. We took out the
Yeah.
small trees and stuff. And then it was
Got one
axes.
right here in the corner behind us.
Right, one of them big ones.
Yeah.
And then we went and did the axes and then chainsaws to clear that out.
I remember that very well. I remember that so well because that is when Miss Hope got poison ivy from carrying that stuff out on her back.
Yep,
And that's when I taught her about bleach.
yep. But when you get tired of the scratching, use bleach.
Yeah, but she had to dilute it, and she did what I said, because bleach will kill or dry up anything, but you have to use it in the right portions so you do not hurt yourself.
You don't get a chemical burn, but it will
That's
get
right.
rid of it.
It will get rid of it.
Yep.
And that's, you know, there's a lot of the old folk remedies that work.
Mm-hmm.
Modern medicine, in general, works better.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that these folk remedies from 100 to 150 years ago didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Because quite a few of them did. And if you study medicine at our level,
Mm-hmm.
you find this out. One of the best set of books written on that is the Outlander series.
Mm-hmm.
Because the young lady who wrote those books had such a following that experts throughout the world would assist her. And when she was writing about Clara, the main character, right,
Mm-hmm.
in the Outlander series, being of course a World War II British nurse that was transported back in time, when she did these different things medically, the experts went and looked it up, the historical experts,
Mm-hmm.
and yes, this was used. And then the modern botanists or medical people went and looked it up and said, yes, this is the way it was used.
Mm-hmm.
So when you read that in her books, you are reading actually good medicine for if your butt is stuck in the field and you have learned it from that.
This is all you got. It buys you time if nothing else.
Yeah.
We have canoed, camped, in all kinds of weathers, tornadoes, severe storms, lightning strikes. I mean, we've been
From way up north to down south.
all over the place. We've been all over the place. We've been there eating lunch next to big alligators.
And water moccasins,
And
just
water
keep an eye on them.
Yeah. We, cleared land together, taught people together. The years that we did the Boy Scout stuff together, we went and did the living history discussion for the Scout camp out.
Well, not only them, we went to the organized Scottish gatherings,
Mm-hmm.
and we laid out 2 large tents full of weapons, and we taught the Scottish-American influence on the colonial period.
Yep, I remember that.
Right, and
I remember when it was University of North Alabama came and videotaped us that time.
that's right.
For use with their postgraduate classes
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. And then you would do the college thing over here of history they don't put in history books.
Right.
And every time he did that, it would sell out, and the audience would be just history professors and stuff like that. So the history, the knowledge, etc.
Well, we were talking about that a little today. That movies have influenced the average American's thinking of history.
Mm-hmm.
The real Wild West was Kansas,
Bleeding Kansas,
right?
yeah.
North Texas and Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
The big Indian fight was here in Alabama at Fort Mims.
Mm-hmm. That was the big Indian massacre.
Right.
Of
That
whites.
was August 31st, 1813.
Mm-hmm. That was the biggest loss of life.
Right, of Indian massacre in U.S. history. And the other thing I brought up, the very first 911 call made in the United States was here in Alabama.
You
The
also,
first American public TV was here in Alabama.
and also you pointed out years ago that the law that was on the books in Birmingham, Alabama, that a woman couldn't drive a car on a public road unless a man was walking in front of her with a cowbell and a lantern yelling, "Woman driver."
Woman driver.
That was from like 1913. You know, It was a city ordinance in Birmingham,
Oh, did they
Alabama.
ever cancel that?
It's still there. They never
Oh,
took it off the books. They
okay.
just don't enforce that thing.
Well, at least it's logical.
The only knife in the state of Alabama that's illegal is the Bowie because it was labeled a dueling weapon, and you couldn't legally possess a
Right,
Bowie
and they
knife.
outlawed. One of the first game laws was and this is from the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
It's illegal to hunt deer at night with torches.
Mm-hmm.
And also one of the laws that used to be on the books in Alabama was when a male goes to church on Sunday, he has to be armed to protect his family from the Indians.
Yep, supposed to be armed.
That's right, because you got to remember the last Indian uprising in Alabama, I think, was 1835, and the last Apache killed on the warpath in the United States was either 1935 or 1937.
Mm-hmm.
So, for
Yeah.
me, that's not long ago.
Mm-hmm.
For a lot of people it is, but
The
I'm in
term,
my 80s.
the term that we heard down here in the South a lot when I was a boy was, God willing and the creeks don't rise.
Yeah,
They weren't talking about the physical creek, they were talking about the Creek Indians.
that's right.
And it was a saying that, will you do it? God willing, if the creeks don't rise, yes, I'll do it.
See, that was part of the Scottish influence because when the Creek Indian War came during our War of 1812,
Mm-hmm.
and Jackson came down, the principal chiefs of the two Creek Indian nations
Mm-hmm.
was Chief McKee, William Weatherford,
Mm-hmm.
High-Headed Peter McQueen.
Yeah.
Listen to these Indian names.
Yeah, which were all
Right,
Scottish.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right, they're all Scottish names.
Mm-hmm.
And these were the Indian chiefs at that time. So the Scottish influence in America was very far-reaching, not only into the white colonial race, but into the indigenous people that was here then, because a lot of Scots married into the tribes.
Before I forget about it, something that you taught me I'd like you to talk about, because a lot of my viewers are doing their own prepping and stuff like that. Deer meat. You say to age deer meat.
I don't say to age it like the Brits do.
No, but what
They
I'm
hang
saying.
it up till it rots.
No. I'm saying, but tell me, on camera so they can get this, because this is something you taught me. I've just cleaned a deer, and I've got the deer meat laying in front of me.
All right, I aged deer meat two ways. The way I primarily aged it is, I built a tripod outside the cabin.
Right.
I'd go out there and, of course, gut my deer, drop all my guts in 5-gallon buckets, makes it easier to get rid of, because it's hard to pick up loose, slippery guts.
Yes.
Okay. Then I would skin my deer, cut off a little bit of fat, and slide one of these modern nets over it.
Sock over it. Yeah.
And let it hang there unless we had, like this coming week,
Hot
90-degree weather
Yeah.
in the winter time, and let it hang there for 4 or 5 days.
Mm-hmm.
And it improves the taste of meat for me,
Mm-hmm.
unless you just had a deer walk out there singing lullabies and you dropped him with one shot. There was no blood running through him. He's not
He's calm.
that way. He's calm, and it does have an effect on the meat. And if you don't believe it, ask the people who produce steak, because they do everything they can to keep them cows calm until the instance they kill them.
Yeah, they don't want to know they're about to die,
Right.
because if they get scared, that adrenaline's what you're tasting.
That's right.
And when you've got somebody that's run deer with dogs, and that dog has run that deer 5 miles, it tastes horrible.
It tasted tainted.
That's when you ground that up for hamburger meat or ground that up for sausage. 'cause
But you
covered
know,
up.
I even aged squirrel and rabbit. I would take those and clean them off, and then I'd take them and hang them out on my back deck, which was fenced in, where the insect and all couldn't get to, and let them hang there for 3 or 4 days and air out real good. And because I enjoyed making a thick brown gravy
Mm-hmm.
with some onions in it and putting in a couple of squirrel legs
Mm-hmm.
and maybe some deer, not deer, but rabbit,
Mm-hmm.
and making myself some gravy and rabbit and squirrel.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way with deer, I know people saw it up and they make steaks and all of that. Well, if you remember, I used to follow the muscle out and cut those off,
Mm-hmm.
and then I would cut little pieces like this, make a slice down the center, turn them wrong side outwards and make butterfly steaks.
Mm-hmm.
And when I cooked it, I could cook it in gravy, or I could take it and put it in the oven and put a slice of bacon in each little butterfly.
Mm-hmm.
There's just so much I could do
So
with
many
it
ways to do it.
to change the taste of what I was going to eat.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was the thing. You and I both grew up where wild game was just food.
That's right.
It wasn't some exotic thing. It was you're providing food for the family. So, yeah, we had cows and hogs and chickens, but you were just as likely to have squirrel and gravy or deer or rabbit or quail or whatever. And when those seasons rolled around, we would a lot of times, you know, because that was getting up time whenever you're going to be butchering, because it's cool now. We don't
Right,
butcher in the
yeah.
heat.
After October, the second week
Oh,
of
yeah.
October, you had first frost. Now you can butcher.
Now you can butcher the big animals like hogs and stuff like that. Well, that's going to go in the freezer. So we're going to be eating,
Or smoked.
or smoked, and so we're going to be eating the wild game during the winter a lot of times, because when that goes out of season and you eat what's in your freezer, let's say by May or June, well, now you're rolling over to cow and hog and chicken.
Mhm.
And that would roll you back around, because now you're getting a little tired of deer and squirrel. Now steak would be nice. And
Let me tell you one of the things I learned trapping. Because I trapped for a couple of years. And when we trapped, we ate what we trapped.
Mhm.
We ate beaver, coon, just whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Except for bobcat.
Yeah.
You can barbecue bobcat, you can fry it, you can bake it, you can pot boil it. The more you chew it, the better it gets, and it tastes like inner tube.
Yes.
Don't try to eat a bobcat unless you just really are trying to set some kind of record for stupidity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now, that was one of the things on one of the early rendezvous that kind of, I think, impressed you a little bit more than me, is I knew how to cook tripe.
Oh yeah.
Small pieces of
Right. A lot
tripe.
of people didn't know that.
I would cook tripe, and we were
Yeah.
at one of the events, and I had, you know, we were poor, and so I had brought tripe with me to cook, and I cut it into small pieces so you could chew it, and then was cooking it, frying it, and then made dipping sauces to go with it.
Right. And I ate it.
Oh, he thought it was good. He said, you know, damn.
Yeah, because
like-
I'd grown up on tripe.
yeah, we would
Yeah.
do that type
Well,
stuff.
during World War II, there was very little red meat.
Mhm.
It all went to troops overseas. And about the only red meat that I saw was red meat that didn't go overseas, like tripe,
Mhm.
you know. The meat that we ate was fowl. Of course, everybody raised chickens and
Mhm.
geese and ducks
Mhm.
and rabbits.
Mhm.
And that was the meat that we had, and because of it, I'm still not a red meat eater, except for
Mhm.
deer, which is you have to add grease to,
Mhm.
because if you eat it all the time without it, it'll
That's
not
the reason
good
you'd
for
keep
you.
a coon,
Yeah,
and you'd grind up a coon with the deer meat to make hamburger, because the grease out of the coon
yeah,
would make it where you could fry the deer meat and make hamburgers out of it, or meatloaf, or
and eating a bear is like eating a wax candle with the string out.
yeah.
That is so greasy. I have
Oh, now.
never understood this. Yes, I eat bear. Well, I eat alligator, and
Yeah.
I might go back for seconds, but I might not. Yeah.
Yeah, there've been warned once that a big lizard, i.e. an alligator, when it
Yeah.
wasn't legal to shoot alligator, but there'd be a big lizard show up in a swimming hole, and it would just kind of accidentally catch a 303. And you could barbecue it, you could do whatever with it, just a big hunk of meat, but you know.
I would never shoot an alligator. I have heard that one of the ways to trap them is to make yourself a bale of wire and put seashells halfway around it and shake it back and forth, which to the gator sounds like large fish slapping the smaller fish to eat them. And then when you call him up, shoot him right here, which really does not kill him unless you use an armor-piercing ammo, but stuns him, and then take a hatchet and chop behind his neck and run a reed down the spine and pull him out, and of course skin out the tail and maybe the legs. I have heard that. I would never put it into practice because it is illegal.
It is forbidden to do such a thing. They have seasons for that. And even though you've got grandkids in that swimming hole and there's some big gator done showed up, you should call your official authorities and never take it upon yourself to kill a big lizard.
Nope, you should not do that now. I guess it'd be all right to throw a rope around him and hook it to the canoe and drag him on down the creek.
Well, wasn't it a family member of yours that said that time there was a big lizard in the swimming hole and he tied a rope and he was going to pull it to the river, but he was pulling it at 30 miles an hour behind the truck?
Well,
he drug it to the river.
Yeah, it didn't take long to move that
said,
gator out.
He said he enjoyed the ride. He was plumb tuckered out when I got him to the river and untied him.
Miss Ann came down, and it wasn't a big gator. He was about 8 foot. And she said, I want it gone because we got grandkids and we got dogs down there.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how gators feel about eating grandkids, but they love dog meat.
Yes.
So, I did not kill that gator. We did move that gator. We did pull him out. We did put some big rubber bands around the snout, and we took him over to the next river over and turned him loose. And you know, right beyond that river is Travis Bridge. And Travis came from there, and he was the commanding officer to Alamo.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. Right there north of Evergreen, or northeast of Evergreen.
Well, when you and I went and canoed the Delta, we went through Sims, Alabama, and that's where the commander of the CSS Alabama,
Old Admiral Sims,
had come and set up shop after the war. Old Admiral Sims. So,
right.
A lot of history. Well, guys, we could go on talking for the next 3 or 4 hours.
Well, we have already been at it since 12.
Yes, I know. In fact, he finally said, you want to start doing a video because we've been going non-stop because we enjoy each other's company. But guys, I hope in the future get to do another sit down with Francis and us sit and do this. But I wanted publicly to honestly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, sir, for your friendship and all your teachings and learnings over the years. It has meant the world to me.
Well, brother, it was a pleasure. I got to tell you, through the years, most people that I have met and enjoyed teaching has been the Boy Scouts of America. Cause never does a man stand so tall as when he stoops to help a child. And then the other groups is your living history groups. They're so eager to learn. And if you're a worthwhile instructor and you study your history, and be honest, if you don't know the answer, don't try to bluff it. Say, I will look that up. I taught for a long time, and I was a guest lecturer, and my thing, I would walk in and I would tell them, my lecture is on this subject. I will give you a preamble for 10 minutes. At that time, I will entertain questions from the floor because they trigger memories I don't even know I've got anymore. And when you quit asking questions, this is over. Whether it's 10 minutes from now or 4 hours from now. And that's the longest Ann and I were ever on platform at one time, and we had to go. And that was 4 hours, and that was on the death of a child.
You were such a great influence on me in your teaching style, how calm you were, how I could ask questions on any topic relating to the wild or whatever, and you were honest and said, I don't know, or here's how I would approach that, or here's how I do it. And the skill sets that you passed on to me. And later when we were doing the living history, when I was third in command, and you would give me direct details to take care of and things like that. Responsibilities. That was a huge vote of confidence to me to do it. And later on, when I started in 2008 doing my channel, I didn't start it to start a channel. I was answering a challenge that somebody else had put out, and you had to do a video to do the challenge. And I posted that video, and then somebody asked me a question. And I remembered you. And I had asked that question to you once. And so I went and did another video to answer that question. To take what you had showed me and pass it on. Because like we used to say, you know, your job now is to pass it on to the next. And now after all these years, I've grown my channel into what it is. And I'm making a living off of it now. Because of the knowledge and teachings, and a great deal of that is because of you. And I want to say thank you.
Well, you're more than welcome. It's like you're welcome in this. Over 1,000 volumes of history in this room. There's rack after rack of guns that go all the way back to the 1700s. There's rack after rack of knives. There's a rack over there complete of swords going all the way back pre-Revolutionary War.
It's like walking into an interactive museum where you can interact with it. So if we want to talk about the Johnson rifle, he'll pull out a Johnson rifle. We're talking about, you know, a French musket of the Revolutionary War. He's got one sitting
right over here
behind us. You know, Zouaves, long guns, everything. It's a little bit of everything, and I learned so much. In my cap and ball guys, I learned so much from this man of us sitting and talking guns. I just cannot thank you enough.
Well, that's what happens when your hobby is people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not the thing, it's the people.
I have had problems, though, staying off a trail of sin, lust, and degradation, because I have enjoyed life.
Yes. That's the whole thing. Enjoy it. Well, guys, thank you very much for watching. If you haven't, please hit that like, share, and subscribe button before we go. Until next time, guys, wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.